world no longer needs artists who are tourists, who are taking photographs as the world goes by. What humanity is aching for are responsible artists who are actively engaged in social development. Artists are the story gatherers and the story keepers and the storytellers, reflecting humanity onto itself. And I, as a theater artist, I take that responsibility very seriously because stories are the base on which we build our culture. The stories we tell and the stories we don't tell. They are the ground from which we grow. And responsible artists must be checking those stories that we root ourselves in for story mismatch. What does that mean? Well, it's really simple. It means, does the story we tell actually play out in the world? So here's an example of that story. So one of the stories that we tell is, seniors do not have sex. I know, it is a very innocuous story, but bear with me, okay? Let's just test it for mismatch. Turns out there's a problem here. There are some very real social and health implications if we as a society tell the story that seniors do not have sex. Because then we can't see the statistic because it's not part of the story. And this statistic is telling us that the rates of HIV, AIDS, and STIs in adults over 50 in the last decade have more than doubled. And we're not talking about it. If it was youth, we'd talk about it because our story says youth have sex. Concerned agencies and some seniors and myself got together to look at that story mismatch and to find out what the real story was. And the story that we ended up telling was vastly different from the story that seniors do not have sex. When we started to look at the stories of multiple seniors in this day and age, and then we started to look at the stories of lots of people in this day and age, and then we went even further and we started to look at the stories across humanity, some patterns emerged. Patterns that identified that statistic as actually a symptom of a greater story that wasn't being told. That story that wasn't being told was the story of the societal denial of the essential humanity of our older adults. We've never been in this place. We don't know what to do. But the tragedy of that essential denial was the fact that we were losing out on some of the most tremendous potential in our elders today. So, responsible artists must be looking for those story mismatches, but they also have to be looking at the patterns through the stories, not just one story, no matter how compelling that story is, but through multiple stories and through stories across humanity, through time and space, in order to be looking for those patterns and the greater story ahead. And it is only through identifying those patterns and those story mismatches that we can align the story we tell with reality. And when we can do that, we are better positioned to be able to address the threats ahead of us. Let's look at another story we tell. We say that bullying is bad, and we would all agree with that, right? Here's where it gets tricky. Dominance is used in leadership at various times, in various ways, with various outcomes, and sometimes it looks a hell of a lot like bullying. Youth who experience this and see this often see this as a natural evolution because the capacities to discern between an opportunity to use wise leadership and use dominance for that and use dominance for an opportunity to gain power and status, well, those skills are not well developed in our species. As a responsible artist, for me to talk about the story of bullying in youth, I have to look for the story mismatch, right? I have to look for the patterns involved, and now I have to raise some very real questions about how we, not just individually, not just youth, but we as a species conduct ourselves. Now, I don't espouse to have any answers, so my plays don't have endings. Which brings me to the third most potent and delicious component of being a responsible artist today, which is leveraging this public space to create our endings together. Let's just think about how art works for a second, okay? The artist creates the art. You as an individual audience member, you're looking at the art and you're internalizing that art and you're letting it mix with your belief systems and the way you think and the way you think about your thinking, if you think about your thinking, and you are interpreting that and you're letting that information shape your meaning making. That is a tremendous, powerful position to be in for me, quite frankly, and a wonderful opportunity. So what happens if we actually make this a communal experience where we take it out of being an individual experience and being an experience that we shape our meaning making together. Here's an example of how that can work. Did a production called Don't You Know How to Be Canadian, where new immigrant families came together to look at the xenophobia and racism that they experienced in their new home, Canada, and in their traditional cultures. And some interesting story mismatches occurred. One particularly powerful story about relativism. So the story that was being told was, you do what you want to do and you believe what you want to believe and I believe what I want to believe and oh, we'll all just get along. Turns out the opposite is true. That kind of relativism actually breeds conflict if we as a society do not have the capacity to judge our actions from a higher level. So in this particular play, we raised those questions without an ending. And we performed the play. And then we performed it a second time. And we invited the audience into the world of the play. We invited them in to problem solve, to intervene, to share their opinions and ideas. But most importantly, we invited them in to create an ending together. We collectively decided on what the ending would be. But it didn't stop there. Because the next question, the more important question, was, how can we judge if this is a good ending? And then finally, what would it take for us to create this ending? And that's how you can create your endings together. Speaking of endings, my time is almost up. But I just wanted to amend my slide, because at the end of the day, I can't ethically assure you that this is solely the responsibility of the artist. As a matter of fact, no one who has the capacity to see a story mismatch or the capacity to think about story mismatch is off the hook. You must be looking for patterns across humanity. And then you have the even greater responsibility to encourage thinking and caring in your community with the precious realization that community is not geophysical, nor is it ethnocultural, but it is global. And we need each other. Thank you.